Hi, I'm Esme. For 3 years, I sent my parents $650 a week so they could live comfortably. I paid their rent, their groceries, their doctor visits. But at my brother's engagement party, they stood in front of everyone and called me the burden of the family. People laughed. I didn't. 40 minutes later, every account they depended on disappeared. You think that was revenge? No, that was survival. Because sometimes, the only way to stop being their burden is to let them finally carry their own weight. The first thing I remember about that night wasn't the music or the lights. It was the smell of champagne and roses, expensive ones, the kind I never bought for myself. The ballroom glowed with amber light bouncing off crystal chandeliers. Scottsdale had cooled down just enough for people to wear suits without sweating through them, and every table shimmered with glassware polished within an inch of its life. I stood near the entrance longer than I should have, pretending to check my phone while trying not to look out of place. My brother Silas was easy to spot. He was always easy to spot. Tall, confident, and surrounded by laughter. His fiancée, Kayla, had that sort of beauty that made people believe she'd been born for events like this. I, on the other hand, had bought my dress from a clearance rack. It fit fine but didn't sparkle. Nothing about me ever sparkled, at least not in this family. Mom and Dad, Vera and Graham, were standing near the stage, glowing in the attention of their friends. I heard someone say, "You must be so proud," and my mother, with that smooth, polished smile, replied, "Oh, we're blessed. Silas is the kind of son every parent hopes for." She didn't see me standing a few feet away. Or maybe she did. It didn't matter. A waiter passed by, offering champagne. I took one, mostly for something to do with my hands. My heart wasn't racing yet, just quietly drumming, that low thump of nerves you feel when you know you're out of your league. I told myself to relax. This was a celebration. Families fight, families heal. Maybe tonight would be normal. When Kayla spotted me, she glided over like she'd been trained for it. "Esme, I'm so glad you came," she said, flashing a smile that looked ready for a magazine cover. Her tone was warm, but her eyes flickered toward the stage where photographers were arranging the family shot. "Can you hang back for a bit? We're just doing a quick one with the parents." I nodded. "Of course." She squeezed my arm like I'd just agreed to something generous. "You're the sweetest." I looked for my name on the seating chart by the entrance. The calligraphy was beautiful, gold ink on cream paper, but I had to search longer than I expected. Finally, I found it. Table 14, near the restrooms. Perfect. As the evening carried on, I smiled when required, clapped when others did, but mostly I watched. My parents floated from group to group, soaking up compliments. "You raised such a gentleman," someone said to my father. "He gets that from his mother," Dad joked, and everyone laughed. I caught a few glances from people who recognized me but couldn't quite remember how. To them, I was a relative who lived somewhere else. The one who wasn't married. The one who sent money, but never stories. The sound of silverware tapping against glass pulled me back to the stage. My mother had taken the microphone. "Everyone," she said, "if I could have your attention for just a minute." She was radiant in that way she always was in public. Hair perfectly curled, posture impeccable, voice soft but commanding. She raised her glass toward Silas and Kayla. "We are so proud of you both. Silas has always been our saving grace. From the time he was little, he was the one who made us believe good things happen to good families." Applause filled the room. Silas looked down shyly, playing humble for the crowd. "And every star," my mother continued, pausing just long enough to ensure everyone was listening, "needs something to carry. Thank you, Esme, for being our burden. We love you anyway." A wave of laughter rolled through the tables. Some guests chuckled politely, unsure if they'd missed the joke. Others laughed too loudly, eager to show they were in on it. I stood frozen, glass halfway to my lips. My father smiled, tipping his head like it was harmless fun. Silas gave me a small shrug, the kind that said, "Don't make a scene." Something inside me cracked so quietly, I almost didn't notice it. My chest felt tight, like someone had hooked a string inside my ribs and was pulling it slow, steady, cruel. I didn't remember setting my glass down, But when I looked down, it was empty. I walked out without saying goodbye. No one stopped me. The sound of laughter followed me into the hallway, then faded as the ballroom doors closed behind me. Outside, the desert air felt cooler than I expected, almost sharp. I took a deep breath that hurt going in. The parking lot lights hummed. My reflection in the car window looked tired, older than 34. I unlocked the door, sat down, and stared at my phone screen until it blurred. I opened my banking app out of habit, an automatic motion, like checking if I still existed. The numbers glowed back at me. Transactions lined up like accusations. Venue deposit, $2,500. Floral arrangements, $800. Custom cake, $560. Catering balance, $1,400. All charged to my card, under the label, family account. I scrolled back through months of statements, my pulse quickening with every line, payments for their electricity, insurance, medical bills. I remembered Mom's voice from years ago. "You make more than we ever did, honey." So, it's just until we get through this rough patch. 3 years later, the rough patch had become my life. In the glow of the dashboard, I whispered, "For 3 years I bought them comfort. Tonight they gave me contempt." The phone slipped from my hand onto the passenger seat. My fingers were cold, but my thoughts were clear. Every dollar I sent had been meant as love, proof that I still belonged somewhere. But standing in that ballroom, hearing my name turned into a punchline, I understood something ugly. Love shouldn't make you small. I started the engine, the headlights cutting through the dark. The road home was empty, just long stretches of asphalt and silence. My hands shook once on the wheel, then steadied. I wasn't crying. There wasn't anything left to cry about. At a red light, I picked up my phone again. My banking app was still open. My thumb hovered over the deactivate button for the automatic transfers. One tap, and everything would stop. The weekly payments, the bill coverage, the comfort I'd built for people who didn't even see me. I hesitated, the screen reflecting my face, pale, tired, but alive. Then I locked the phone and placed it face down. Not yet. Not here. The light turned green. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, the world felt unnaturally quiet. The fountain by the entrance kept trickling water, that artificial calm I used to love when I came home after long workdays. Tonight it sounded hollow. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat at the edge of the couch. My mind replayed the scene. Mom's voice, the laughter, the way Kayla pretended not to see me leave. Every second of it burned like a film loop. I poured myself a glass of water, but it tasted metallic. The clock on the wall read 10:42 p.m. I remembered how Mom used to call me every Sunday at that time, asking if I'd sent the money yet. Sometimes she didn't even say hello first, just, "Did it go through?" I stared at my reflection in the dark window and said out loud, "They made a mistake." The words didn't sound angry, they sounded calm, final. I picked up my keys again, walked back out to the car, and sat behind the wheel. The resort lights were still visible in the distance, small glittering dots against the horizon. I whispered again, "And I won't let them make it again." Then I drove away, the desert swallowing the sound of my engine, leaving only the steady hum of a woman finally reaching her breaking point, and the faint promise of something stronger waiting on the other side. I didn't sleep much that night. My apartment was dark, the street lights cutting thin gold lines across the wall. I lay there replaying my mother's words from the toast, her voice lilting and sweet while she made me the punchline of her perfect evening. The laughter echoed long after the room had emptied. When I finally closed my eyes, the world felt tilted, like I'd been standing on a stage I never agreed to step on. By the time dawn broke, the faint blue light slipping through the blinds, my phone had already come alive. The screen glowed with missed calls, 17 of them. I sat up slowly, the air cool against my bare arms, and pressed play on the first voicemail. "Sweetheart," my mother began, her voice syrupy, rehearsed. "You took it too seriously. We were just being funny. You know how people joke when they're nervous. Call me when you wake up, okay?" I didn't move. The next message started before I could even blink. Esme, my father said, his tone clipped, businesslike. I hope you're not thinking of doing anything stupid. Don't be dramatic. You embarrassed your mother last night, but we can fix this. Call her back. I turned the phone face down on the bed. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that hums inside your chest when you realize something's gone permanently wrong. I swung my legs over the side, rubbed my eyes, and went to make coffee. The smell filled the apartment, grounding me in something normal. When I sat down at the small kitchen table, I opened my laptop. The glow from the screen reflected off the stainless steel kettle beside me. My cursor hovered over the folder labeled Family Finances. I clicked it open. Line after line appeared. Utility bills, rent transfers, phone plans, prescription co-pays, gas reimbursements. Every piece of my kindness documented like a receipt for a life I didn't get to live. I started closing them one by one. First, the grocery card. Then the automatic payment for their apartment rent. Next, the phone bill, the utilities, the insurance. I logged into each account, methodically unlinking my name, watching the confirmations pile up. You are no longer responsible for this account. There were no dramatic tears, no shaking hands, just the steady rhythm of typing, deleting, confirming. I felt like a surgeon performing a quiet operation, precision, no emotion, no mistake. By the time the sun had fully risen, the last transfer was gone. The clock read 9:12 a.m. The apartment had fallen into an almost sacred silence. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the screensaver, soft desert colors swirling slowly, the same shades that filled the Arizona sky outside. For 3 years, I had built their comfort, one payment at a time. It was never framed as a favor. It was expected. My mother would text, "Dad's blood pressure meds are due," or "The rent went up again." No please, no thank you. Just reminders, like I was payroll. I opened my old ledger, a simple Excel sheet I'd kept for tax purposes. There it was, everything chronicled down to the dollar. Year 1, $650 every week, medication, food, utilities. Year 2, paid their back rent when Mom forgot. Year 3, covered a truck repair. Dad swore he'd pay back. He sold the truck 2 months later. They didn't ask. They just assumed. At the bottom of the document, in the notes section, I typed one last line. Final payment, my dignity. Then I saved the file under a new name, Closure. A vibration on the counter broke the quiet. A text from Mom. You're breaking this family apart. Then another from Dad. You owe us everything. We raised you. I stared at the messages, my coffee gone cold. The words felt like an echo of every conversation we'd ever had. Guilt disguised as love. I thought of my mother's toast, how she'd thanked me for being their burden. This was what she meant. I carried the bills, the shame, and the silence. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed 3 words. Stop calling me. Sent. Seconds later, the typing bubbles appeared on her end, blinking on and off like a heartbeat. Then nothing. The apartment stayed still for a long time. The fridge hummed softly, a car passed outside, and the sunlight edged across the table. I should have felt empty, but instead there was a strange lightness. Not joy, not sadness, something in between, like unclenching a fist I hadn't realized I'd been making for years. I pulled out a notebook I hadn't used since college, the one where I used to track goals and ideas. The pages were yellowed. I wrote across the top, what freedom costs. Underneath, I made a list, not of expenses, but of possibilities. Save for myself, plan a trip, take the photography class. It felt foreign, but good. Then I dialed a number I hadn't used before, my bank's financial planning office. When the woman on the other end answered, her voice was brisk and kind. How can I help you today? I need to set up an appointment, I said. For personal savings and investment accounts, just in my name. Of course, she replied. Tomorrow afternoon work for you? Yes, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Tomorrow's perfect. After hanging up, I walked to the window. The city was waking up, the sound of lawn sprinklers, a dog barking, a delivery truck backing into a driveway. Life continued, unbothered. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the warmth creeping through. Maybe this was what peace really looked like. No applause, no chaos, no guilt pulling at your spine. I sat down again and reread my mother's texts. "You're breaking this family apart. You owe us everything." No apology, no acknowledgement, just accusation. I whispered into the quiet room. Families don't break when you stop paying for them. They break when love becomes currency. My phone buzzed once more, but I didn't look right away. I finished my coffee first, rinsed the cup, wiped the counter. When I finally checked the screen, it wasn't Mom or Dad this time. It was from Silas. The message was short, cold. "You went too far." I stared at it until the words blurred. For a second, I thought about all the birthdays I paid for, the trips I couldn't afford because I was covering their bills, the way he'd called me kiddo like I was still the little sister tagging along. I set the phone down and whispered to the empty kitchen, "No, Silas, I just finally stopped." The clock ticked on, slow and deliberate. Somewhere beyond the walls, the world moved as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But I knew something had shifted permanently, something invisible but real. Tomorrow, I'd meet with that financial advisor. Tomorrow, I'd start saving for a life that didn't include being anyone's safety net. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat in the same chair, watching the light crawl across the table until it reached the old family photo on the shelf. In it, we were smiling. My parents' hands rested proudly on Silas's shoulders, while mine were folded in my lap. Looking at it now, I could finally see what I'd missed all along. I wasn't part of that picture. I was holding it together. The message from Silas stayed on my screen long after the notification light stopped blinking. "You went too far." It wasn't the words that cut me. It was how familiar they sounded. I'd been hearing versions of that line my whole life. Don't talk back. Don't upset your mother. Don't make it about you. I set the phone face down and exhaled. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen like background noise in a waiting room. I reached for my mug, but the coffee had gone cold hours ago. The apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost physical. I opened my laptop again and checked my email. The family thread was still active. I clicked on it out of habit and froze. Vera had removed me from the shared calendar. The title of the latest event, Family Brunch, Celebrating New Beginnings. My name wasn't listed. The photos attached were from the party, Kayla and Silas smiling under a canopy of lights, my parents beaming. I scanned each image, even zoomed in. There wasn't a single trace of me. It was as if I had never been there. Then, Kayla posted something new in the group chat, a perfectly edited photo of her ring and a caption that read, "Surrounded by love." A heart emoji followed. Dozens of comments poured in from family friends. "You all are such a perfect family. You deserve all the happiness in the world." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. It wasn't anger yet, just a hollow recognition. They hadn't erased me last night. They'd been erasing me for years. I clicked out of the chat and opened another folder, one that had nothing to do with them. Invoices. Rows of spreadsheets glowed on the screen. Each one told a story they never cared to hear. Year 1. The first time Mom called and said, "Can you help with Dad's medical bills? The insurance is being difficult." I remember how she said it like it was temporary. I sent $650 every Friday, convinced I was doing the right thing. Year 2. "I lost my wallet," she said. "Rent's due Monday. I'll pay you back when your father's check clears." That check never came. I paid 3 months' rent and told myself it didn't matter. Family doesn't keep score, right? Year 3. Dad's truck broke down. He called it a small fix. I covered the repair, only to find out later he'd sold the truck a few weeks afterward. They bought a new couch with the money. They never asked twice. They didn't need to. I had made myself predictable. I remembered one night, years ago, when I asked them for help. My freelance contract had ended unexpectedly, and I was short on my electric bill. It was a simple request. "Just this month," I'd said. Mom's response came instantly. "You're the smart one, Esme." you'll figure it out." That sentence sat with me like a splinter that never healed. I had figured it out by sending more money their way, by working longer hours, by pretending everything was fine. The apartment felt too still, so I stood, stretching, trying to shake off the weight of the past 3 years. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Silas. I considered ignoring it, but pressed play instead. "Esme," he began, his tone carrying that practiced calm he used when talking to clients. "You humiliated Mom. You made everything about you." Again. "This was supposed to be our day, and you turned it into drama." He paused, sighing as if he were the one suffering. "You always do this. You make everything harder than it needs to be." I set the phone down mid-message and let it finish on its own. The sound of his voice filled the room, fading into static. When it stopped, I whispered into the emptiness, "You're welcome for the cake, Silas." I walked to the bookshelf where an old album sat wedged between cookbooks and tax files. I hadn't opened it in years. The cover was peeling, the edges frayed. Inside, the photos were arranged neatly by my mother: birthdays, graduations, vacations. In every picture, Silas stood at the center, smiling like he knew he was the reason the camera existed. My photos were different. I was off to the side, half in frame, sometimes cropped entirely. There was one picture from my college graduation. I remembered that day clearly because I'd driven home alone afterward. My parents had left early for Silas's real estate award dinner. In the picture, only half my gown was visible. Mom's caption below read, "Our proud family moment." Proud of what? I wondered now. Proud that I had kept quiet all these years. Proud that I never complained when they borrowed, lied, and still called me ungrateful when I hesitated. I flipped another page and found a photo of Grandma and me sitting on her porch. She was the only person who ever made me feel seen. Her words echoed in my head. "You don't need anyone to clap for you to be proud of yourself." I smiled faintly and closed the album. The silence that followed wasn't sad. It was sobering. At my desk, I opened a blank spreadsheet and titled it Debt to Daughter. I started typing, week by week, month by month, every payment, every transfer. The total rose fast, $98,000 before I'd even added the recent bills. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the number, nearly 6 figures, and not one thank you. I scrolled to the bottom and wrote in bold, "Unpaid balance, respect." I attached the file to an email addressed to my lawyer, Mark. The subject line, "Just in case." I didn't add a message. He'd know what it meant. As the email sent, I felt the faintest tremor of relief. Not because I'd done something drastic, but because I'd finally stopped pretending it hadn't happened. The afternoon light began to fade through the blinds. My phone vibrated again, lighting up the dim room. Another message from Silas. I didn't even read it this time. I could already guess the words, something about disappointment, family, image. Instead, I opened my journal and began writing. Not notes, not numbers, just thoughts. I was the proof they could endure hard times, but I was never the one they cheered for. The truth was ugly, but freeing. They needed me to stay small, quiet, reliable. That was the role I'd been assigned. But now that I'd stepped outside it, the story no longer made sense to them. The sky outside turned from amber to deep violet. I turned off the lamp, letting the faint glow from the streetlights fill the room. My laptop screen dimmed to black, reflecting my face, older than I remembered, but calmer too. My phone buzzed once more before going silent. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. "They called me dramatic," I said quietly to myself, the words almost a whisper. But they haven't seen anything yet. The next morning, I didn't even have to unlock my phone. The preview lit up as soon as I lifted it from the nightstand. "Hey, just checking in. I hope we're good. No hard feelings from the party, right? Kayla." I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the message. I read it twice, letting each word marinate in disbelief. "No hard feelings," she said, as if what happened at that party was a small misunderstanding, like stepping on someone's toe. As if her silence when I was being humiliated wasn't participation. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I just sat there, the morning light slipping through the blinds, painting quiet stripes across the floor, while my thumb hovered over the reply button. Then, Without typing a single word, I took a screenshot and tucked the phone away. I went about the morning slowly. Coffee, half a piece of toast, no appetite for anything warm. My head ached, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying the weight of too many years of pretending I was okay. Around noon, I returned to my laptop to finish organizing files for my lawyer. I labeled each folder neatly: medical, utilities, rent, ignored texts. And then, almost without thinking, I created a new folder. Disown me, please. It was darkly funny, in a way only someone who's been erased one too many times could appreciate. I dropped everything in. At 3:17 p.m., another text came in. This one from Vera. No words, just a picture. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. A crumpled, charred envelope. Burnt edges, blackened center. Then the caption. Stop clinging to dead things. They won't help you now. I knew exactly what she burned. The letter from Grandma. The one she'd written me in her final year, before she passed, when her mind was still sharp enough to remember who I was, even when she forgot her own birthday. That letter had lived inside my top drawer for nearly a decade. I'd moved apartments 3 times, but it always came with me. I hadn't shown it to anyone. It wasn't a family heirloom. It wasn't embroidered or framed. It was just proof. Proof that someone once saw me. I sank to the floor before I even realized I'd moved. My knees hit the rug, and the photo on the screen blurred as my eyes filled. My body didn't shake. I didn't wail. This wasn't grief. It was something sharper. The image sat there like a wound. And then, from nowhere, a voice surfaced from memory. Grandma's voice, calm and clear, as if she were standing right next to me. You don't need applause to be valid. Just don't disappear, Esme. I closed my eyes and repeated it, once, twice. Then I stood up. I walked over to the drawer where I used to keep the letter. It was empty now, of course, but I opened it anyway. The silence inside that drawer said everything. I pulled out my external hard drive and backed up every file, every receipt, every email. I deleted old family photos from my cloud account, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed to cling to them. That letter had been my last excuse, the final reason I kept wondering if maybe, just maybe, my parents were simply confused, damaged, but not malicious. But no, they were deliberate. They were cruel. I turned on some music, low and steady, the kind of jazz Grandma used to play in her kitchen while slicing apples. It filled the room with warmth. I let it play while I scrolled back to Kayla's message. My thumb hovered again. I typed, "You knew what they would say." I sat with that sentence for a long time. Then I deleted it. Instead, I typed, "Don't text me again." Sent. It was the smallest sentence I'd written in days, but it felt like it weighed 50 pounds. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I wasn't hungry. I sat on the couch with a blanket and lit one of the candles from the engagement party gift bag. The one they handed out with cute little tags that read, "Love always wins." I wondered if Kayla still believed that. Just after midnight, I retrieved a small glass jar from the kitchen, one I usually used for loose tea. I walked back to the drawer, pulled it open again, and slowly placed the printed photo of Vera's burned text message into the jar. I crumpled it, gently. Not out of rage, but with finality. Then I labeled the jar with a sticky note. My handwriting wobbled, but I didn't rewrite it. The last time I begged to belong. I sealed the jar and placed it on the bookshelf next to the album with all the cropped-out pictures. There were no tears, just clarity. I stood in the center of my apartment, lights off, letting the streetlights outside spill their muted glow across the floor. It was so quiet, I could hear the ice melting in my untouched glass of water on the table. There were no more lines left to cross. No more illusions. The morning sun bled through the curtains before I even opened my eyes. And somehow, I already knew, before I touched my phone, before I even stood up, that something had shifted inside me overnight. It wasn't some magical transformation or sudden burst of strength. It was quieter than that, subtle. The kind of clarity that only arrives after you've burned through the last of your excuses. I made coffee without checking my notifications, set a slice of bread in the toaster, and stared out the kitchen window while the kettle hissed. There was a strange stillness in the apartment. Not silence exactly, more like the calm that follows a storm that everyone pretended wasn't coming. I took my coffee to the desk, opened the folder I'd been too tired to finish organizing last night. Archive of Betrayal. The title made me smile, not because it was funny, but because it was accurate. Each document I opened felt like a quiet reckoning. Rent receipts I had paid without question, screenshots of unanswered messages, medical bills I'd covered under the pretense of love. I didn't linger on them. I just labeled, sorted, saved. It wasn't emotional anymore. It was administrative. An hour in, a new message popped up on my screen. A name I hadn't expected to see this soon. Rosa, an old college friend. Not someone I talked to regularly anymore, but still on a few of the same social media groups. She wrote, "I know this might be weird, but you should see this." Attached was a screenshot. Kayla, messaging Vera. 2 weeks before the engagement party. "She's too emotional. I'll keep her away from the front tables." Trust me. My stomach tightened, not with surprise, but with confirmation. The exclusion had been intentional. The smiles rehearsed. The kindness choreographed. I didn't answer Rosa. I didn't need to. I sat back in my chair, coffee forgotten, and stared at the message until it blurred into the soft glow of my screen. Of course, Kayla was in on it. Of course she was. Every thank you for coming moment, every tight-lipped smile, manufactured to keep the image clean while I was quietly erased. For a moment, I felt the familiar urge rise. Justify it. Excuse it. Maybe she was trying to keep peace. Maybe Vera pressured her. Maybe... I stopped myself. No. I picked up my phone and opened a blank message to Kayla. My thumbs hovered, then moved deliberately. "You don't get to smile in my face and laugh behind my back. Do not mistake my silence for consent." I hit send before I could overthink it. Seconds later, 3 dots appeared. Then her reply came. "I was trying to help. You're overreacting." I stared at those words like they were acid. Then I typed, "Not anymore," and hit send again. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even satisfying. But it was necessary. That was the first time I had drawn a boundary and not apologized for it. I closed the app and leaned back, the buzz in my ears fading into something clearer. I let the silence fill in the cracks. Later that afternoon, I pulled down the old photo box from the closet. It smelled like cedar and dust. Inside were stacks of memories I wasn't sure were mine anymore. I pulled out one of the older photos, me and Silas in the backyard, maybe 5 or 6 years old. He was holding a bat, grinning. I was in the background, blurry, arms crossed, a frown on my face. I remembered that day. He'd broken the living room lamp playing baseball inside, and when Mom asked what happened, he pointed at me without blinking. "She did it," he said. And she believed him. Without hesitation. Grandma was the only one who said otherwise. "She doesn't lie," she told my mother. "Esme tells the truth, even when it's ugly." My mother had scoffed. "She's too sensitive." That label clung to me for decades. Too sensitive, too much, too emotional, and it had given everyone around me permission to dismiss me. I sat with that for a while, thumb tracing the edges of the old photograph. Then I slipped it back into the box and pushed it into the farthest corner of the closet. Not gone, but not accessible either. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the rooftops, I took out my phone again. This time, I opened my contact list. One by one, I deleted names. Silas, Kayla, Mom, Dad, blocked. Then I opened my social media and unlinked everything. No more group tags, no more family posts, no more pretending. Finally, I drafted one last message to the family thread. "You've been notified. You've been warned. If this continues, I will act accordingly." I didn't wait. I pressed send. And for once, my name didn't tremble when I hit send. The retaliation was faster than I expected, and dirtier than I imagined. It started with an email, the kind that looks ordinary until your stomach drops halfway through reading it. The subject line read, "Credit alert, new account activity." At first, I thought it was spam. Then I noticed the logo, the same credit bureau I'd used when I froze my reports the year before. I clicked. "A new line of credit has been opened in your name," it said. The words blurred for a second. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. I scrolled down. A furniture store account. Location, Phoenix. Purchase total, $2,314.87. Account holder, Esme Radley. Except, I hadn't bought anything. I sat back in my chair, the cursor blinking at the end of my name as if mocking me. I called the store listed in the email. The automated system took forever to get through. When a representative finally answered, her voice was calm, rehearsed, too calm. "Yes, Ms. Radley, the purchase was approved 2 days ago, 2 recliners and a leather sectional." My mouth went dry. "What address was used for delivery?" She paused. "Let me check. Delivery to 142 North Garrison, Scottsdale." That was my parents' address. I closed my eyes, pressing a hand to my temple. I didn't even need to ask who placed the order. Vera's furniture had always been her pride. Every season, she updated the aesthetic, as she called it. She must have opened the credit line, used my name, my information, my score, and figured I'd never notice. I hung up without finishing the call. The anger didn't come in a rush. It settled like a steady pulse, rhythmic and cold. I opened another tab and logged into my bank. No new withdrawals. Not yet. I checked the credit bureau site next and confirmed what I already knew. The account had been verified with my social security number. They'd crossed from emotional theft to something tangible, legal, documented. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing my financial advisor, Miriam, the woman I'd met with last week. When she answered, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need to file a report for identity misuse," I said. Her voice softened. "What happened?" "My parents opened an account in my name. I want every file locked, every account flagged. I want this contained before they try something else." She hesitated for only a moment before replying. "Understood. Come in this afternoon. We'll handle it together." When I arrived, Miriam had already printed the forms. She laid them out neatly on her desk, her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. "Here's what we'll do," she said, calm and professional. "We'll file a fraud claim, notify the store, and freeze your credit lines for now. You'll get alerts if they try again." "Perfect," I said. "And one more thing, document this thoroughly. I want proof." She nodded. "Of course." By the time I signed the last page, the anger had cooled into something sharper. Focused. Before leaving, I handed her a USB drive. "This is the ledger I mentioned before. 3 years of financial support, everything I covered for them." She flipped through the printed version, scanning the highlighted totals. $98,400. I'd labeled the top of the document, "Not a single thank you." Miriam looked up, her expression soft but unreadable. "You're not the first person I've seen dealing with this kind of situation," she said, "but I've rarely seen anyone so organized about it." "I had to be," I replied quietly. "They relied on my reliability." That earned me a sympathetic smile. "Well, that ends today." It did. From there, I drove straight to the notary's office across town. The sun was starting to dip, painting the desert sky with streaks of gold and lavender. I could have appreciated the view any other day, but not today. Today, everything was too sharp, too clear. Inside the office, I signed the statement Miriam had prepared, a declaration of financial separation and notice of identity misuse. Each stroke of the pen felt deliberate, heavy with years of swallowed pride. When I was done, I sealed the envelope myself and handed it to the clerk for certified mailing. "To be sent to Vera and Graham Ansell," I said. He looked up, verifying the names. "Parents?" "Used to be," I answered. Back home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window as the streetlights flickered on. The world outside was quiet, kids playing across the street, the hum of sprinklers kicking in, a dog barking somewhere far off. I thought about how ordinary everything looked, how no one could guess what just shifted beneath that calm surface. I wasn't just cutting emotional ties anymore. I was drawing legal ones. It wasn't personal now. It was official. They'd wanted to make me the caretaker of their comfort. Now they could explain their behavior to a fraud department instead. I took out the printed copy of the letter I'd sent and slid it into a folder labeled Proof. Then I carried it to the small fireproof safe I'd bought earlier that day. It sat on the floor of my closet, cold metal waiting for purpose. I opened it, placed the folder inside, along with Grandma's photo and the jar that held the ashes of her burned letter. The combination clicked shut. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Instead, I sat back on the edge of the bed and whispered, "They weren't just ungrateful. They were strategic." I could almost hear Grandma's voice again. "Don't disappear, Esme." I smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I won't." The following morning, I woke before sunrise. My phone buzzed with a new notification, one I didn't recognize. The number was blocked, but the message came through anyway. "You're going to regret this." No name, no context, but I didn't need either. I set the phone down, exhaled slowly, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. If they wanted a war, they'd picked the wrong daughter to underestimate. The message had come the night before, just 4 words. "You're going to regret this." I didn't bother replying. I didn't even delete it. I just let it sit there, proof that they were running out of control and decency at the same time. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the sound. My phone buzzing non-stop, rattling on the nightstand like it was trying to warn me. Notifications filled the screen. Facebook tags, direct messages, comments. For a moment, I thought something had happened to one of them. Then I saw the post. It was my mother. "My daughter has abandoned us," it read. "Elder abuse is real. We are being left with nothing." Beneath the text was a photo, her in a hospital gown, hair messy, face pale and weary. It was staged. I knew that gown. She'd worn it when she had a routine checkup 2 months ago, a checkup I'd paid for. I could feel my pulse rise in my throat as I scrolled. The comments came in waves. "How could your child do this to you? You raised her too well. That's what happens when kids get too much. You deserve better." Kayla had liked the post. Silas had shared it. And just like that, the story was set. I was the villain. I pressed my hands against the counter, staring at the light on my phone screen. Anger burned, but not the kind that makes you scream. The quiet kind, the focused kind. I took screenshots of everything. The post, the comments, the timestamps, the likes. I copied the IP traces from the public shares and dumped them into a folder on my laptop titled Evidence, Slander. Then I opened my email and typed a quick note to my lawyer. "If they want public, I'll give them legal." I attached the screenshots and hit send, but the story didn't end there. Within an hour, my inbox was full of messages from relatives and distant friends. Some of them were gentle. "Hey, what's going on?" Others weren't so kind. "How could you do that to your parents?" one of my aunts wrote. "You've changed, Esme. You used to be such a good girl." Good girl. That was always the currency they used when I obeyed. I stood by the window, letting the Arizona sunlight hit my face. I didn't answer anyone. I just let the storm swirl. If they wanted chaos, I'd give them silence. Silence lasts longer. By the afternoon, another truth surfaced, one that made my hands shake. My coworker Lydia called. "You might want to see this," she said quietly. "Kayla's been talking." She sent a link, an engagement party recap someone had posted publicly. Photos from the event, but not all of them. None with me in them. Instead, the caption read, "Our close family members had such a wonderful night celebrating love." I scrolled, and there it was, a subtle comment from Kayla under one of the pictures. "Poor Esme couldn't make it on time. She missed the family photo, but we know she was there in spirit." I froze. My memory of that night came rushing back. The way Kayla had texted me that the photos were at 7:30, the same moment I'd arrived to find the group already posing. They had given me the wrong time on purpose. They'd been building the narrative long before I'd even begun to fight back. I sat down on the couch, staring at my hands. They were trembling, but not from fear this time, from restraint. I could have posted everything, the receipts, the fraud, the manipulation, but what good would that do? People don't believe quiet truth when loud lies are prettier. So instead, I turned on my computer and did something smarter. I gathered everything: screenshots, emails, financial records, the certified notice I'd sent, every proof of their deceit. I uploaded them to my lawyer's secure cloud, then granted view-only access to a handful of family members. No message, no context, just the link. The folder name: What They Don't Want You to See. I stared at the upload bar until it reached 100%. Then I closed the laptop and let the silence reclaim the room. By evening, the comments online had grown nastier. Strangers lecturing me about family duty, people quoting scripture about honoring your parents. I could almost hear Vera behind every line, twisting guilt into poetry. Around 8 p.m., I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the balcony. The air was warm, the desert quiet, stretching wide and endless. For a second, I thought about calling Silas, just to hear his voice, to ask if any of this meant anything to him anymore. But then I remembered his voicemail from weeks ago. "You humiliated Mom." He wasn't going to understand. He never had. The sky turned pink, then darkened to that deep purple that only Arizona knows how to make. I leaned back in the chair, breathing slow, steady. My mind was already shifting from anger to clarity. They were orchestrating a campaign, not just to shame me, but to erase me. And for the first time, I realized how frightened they must be. You don't attack that loudly unless you're terrified someone might hear the truth. I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and checked my messages again. Dozens of notifications still blinking. I ignored them. Instead, I opened the Notes app and started writing, one sentence after another, not for them, but for me. I am not your villain. I am not your caretaker. I am not your scapegoat. Each word steadied me, like bricks stacking in a wall I should have built years ago. Then I turned off every notification, silencing them all in one sweep. I sat there in the dark, my laptop closed, the hum of the fridge filling the quiet again. My chest hurt, but it was a good hurt, a release. And then, just as I was about to stand up, an email notification flashed across the top of the screen. Subject line: Family meeting, this Sunday. No sender listed, just the shared family thread. I stared at it for a long moment, half in disbelief, half in amusement. So this was their next move. A family meeting. As if we were still pretending to be one. I showed up 15 minutes early, not to apologize, but to end it. Their house looked the same from the outside. Beige stucco, fake green lawn, the same stone lion statues flanking the walkway that my father refused to throw out, no matter how many times they cracked. But the inside felt smaller. Or maybe I'd just outgrown it. The back gate was already open. I stepped through, heels crunching against gravel. A folding table had been set up near the fire pit. On it, a plate of store-bought cookies sat next to 2 jugs of lemonade. 6 plastic chairs were arranged like a mock version of diplomacy. Vera stood by the table with her signature smile, tight, stretched, never reaching her eyes. She wore a lavender blouse and too much perfume. "Esme, sweetheart," she said, voice bright, "thank you for coming. Let's put the drama behind us." Silas stood near the fence, arms crossed, posture rigid. He gave a slow nod when our eyes met. Kayla hovered by the drink station, pretending to rearrange the cups. She didn't say a word. Graham was already seated, looking like someone had dragged him out of bed for a jury summons. He didn't look at me. That was fine. I didn't sit. "I won't be long," I said. My voice was calm, almost too calm. Vera stepped closer. "Let's not start like this. We're a family. Families fight. Families forgive." "You mean families forget?" I replied. "But I didn't come here to forget." Silas stepped forward. "Look, Esme, we know things got out of hand online. Mom shouldn't have posted what she did." Kayla chimed in, voice high and brittle. "It wasn't meant to be public." I tilted my head. "But it was. And you liked it. Silas shared it. So let's not pretend that wasn't intentional. They said nothing. I pulled my phone from my bag and tapped the screen. The voice memo was already queued. I hit play. The sound filled the backyard. Vera's voice rang out, clear as crystal. Just let her keep paying until we don't need her anymore. Silas followed, casual as ever. She'll break eventually. No one moved. Even the breeze paused. Kayla let out a small gasp. This is out of context. I stopped the recording. There is no context where that sentence makes sense, I said. I walked to the table and laid down a slim black folder. This is a printout of every dollar I sent you over 3 years. Rent, medicine, groceries, birthday parties I wasn't invited to. There are screenshots of every post, every message, every lie you spun when I stopped playing your game. Vera tried to speak, but I raised a hand. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for clarity. I pulled out a second envelope. This is the letter of legal separation. From this point forward, any attempt to use my name for credit, family association, or emotional blackmail will be met with legal consequences. Silas looked down. Kayla shifted uncomfortably. Vera's mouth opened, but she paused when her phone buzzed. A text. She glanced at it, just for a second. But I caught the panic. So did everyone else. Then, a simultaneous ping on every phone in the group. I pulled mine from my bag again. A new message had come through the family thread. From Vera. Wrap this up. She's still delusional. Delete her again if needed. Silence. Graham leaned back in his chair, shook his head once, and stood. He walked inside without a word. Kayla looked like she might cry. I didn't know she was going to. I didn't wait. I stood tall, looked them in the eye, and said, "Thank you for finally showing everyone who you really are." Then I turned and walked. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble. The sun was warm against my skin as I crossed the yard, past the gate, back to my car. My heart was steady, my breath even. When I slid into the driver's seat, I sat for a long moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the house through the windshield. Then I started the engine and whispered, "I'm not yours to delete anymore." I pulled away slowly, leaving behind the cookies, the lemonade, the folding chairs, and the last illusion that this family would ever treat me as anything more than convenient. For the first time, I didn't feel like their daughter. I felt free. A week passed after that backyard meeting, though time moved strangely, slower but lighter. The constant tension in my chest had thinned out into something gentler, like the air right before sunrise. Scottsdale had started to warm again, spring fading into that dry brightness that only desert cities can pull off. I found myself walking in the park most mornings, coffee in hand, earbuds tucked in, but no music playing. The quiet was different now. It wasn't absence, it was space. No calls, no threats, no guilt. Just birds, the sound of sprinklers misting the grass, and the rhythm of my own footsteps. People talk about peace like it's soft, but real peace has weight. It presses down on you until you realize you can breathe again. On the 7th morning, I came home to find a small brown package on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in clean, careful handwriting that looked almost familiar. Inside was a note. Found this among your grandmother's things. Thought you might want it back. Love, Doreen. Doreen Hale, Grandma's best friend. She'd been quiet through everything, staying out of the family mess, though I always suspected she knew more than she let on. I unfolded the paper inside. It was a photocopy of the letter my mother had burned. I recognized the handwriting immediately, slanted, graceful, looping at the ends of words. "If they ever forget who you are," it read, "I hope you remember for yourself. Love, Grandma." The words blurred before I realized I was crying. It wasn't grief, not exactly. It was relief, that someone had thought enough to save it, that a piece of her love had survived their fire. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter spread before me. The edges smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite scent. I ran my fingers across the lines as if I could still feel her pulse through the ink. "I remember, Grandma," I whispered. "I finally do." After that, the days seemed easier. The silence in my inbox no longer felt like exile. It felt earned. I poured my energy into work, caught up with clients, cleaned the apartment, watered the plants that had somehow survived neglect. By Thursday, I stopped checking my phone for messages that weren't coming. That was when the universe decided to hand me one final reminder of who I was dealing with. The envelope in the mailbox looked ordinary, white, embossed, elegant. I almost smiled when I saw the gold lettering, Kenner Bronte Wedding Celebration. I had designed it myself. The fonts, the layout, even the little floral border. Kayla had begged me for help, and like the fool I was, I'd done it. I sat down on the couch and opened it. The cardstock gleamed under the afternoon light. My eyes moved over every detail until they landed on the guest list printed on the back. My name wasn't there, not Esme, not even a courtesy mention. They'd erased me again. This time, I didn't cry. I walked to the kitchen, pulled a small tin from under the sink, the one I used for incense ashes, and set the invitation inside. A flick of the lighter, a slow curl of smoke. The flame licked the edge of the paper, climbing until the letters warped and blackened. I watched quietly as it turned to ash. "They erased me again," I said softly, but this time, I erased them back. When the last ember dimmed, I carried the tin to the sink and ran water over it until the smoke disappeared. Later that afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Mark. The office smelled of coffee and old leather. He smiled when I walked in. "You look lighter," he said. "I am," I replied. He handed me a file folder. "Everything's finalized. Legal separation confirmed. Financial protection clauses approved. You're free, Esme." Free. The word sat strange on my tongue. I'd said it before, but it never felt as real as it did in that moment. He closed the folder and added, "You did the right thing. You took your power back without sinking to their level. That's rare." I nodded, offering a small smile. They taught me what not to become. After the meeting, I stopped by the bank across the street. I opened a new business account under my name only. No joint access, no beneficiaries, no one else's fingerprints. The teller congratulated me, and when she slid the documents across the counter, I caught my reflection in the glass partition. I looked calm, capable, mine. That evening, as the sky turned that soft desert pink, I drove to the cemetery on the edge of town where Grandma was buried. It was quiet except for the wind moving through the trees. I parked under the same oak I used to sit beneath as a child when she'd bring me here to talk to Grandpa. The dirt path felt familiar beneath my shoes. I carried with me a small wooden box, a keepsake I'd found at a local thrift store. Inside, it was a framed copy of her letter, printed from Doreen's photocopy. I placed it gently beside her headstone, then pressed my hand to the ground. "I'm not your burden," I whispered. "I'm your legacy." The words carried on the wind, soft but steady. For a long time, I just sat there, watching the sun dip low behind the mountains. The quiet wasn't empty. It was full of memories, of strength, of things finally settled. When I drove home, I didn't turn on the radio. The hum of the tires on the road was music enough. I parked, went upstairs, and made myself tea. The apartment glowed faintly from the lamps I'd left on timers. I picked up the framed letter one last time and placed it on my bookshelf beside Grandma's photo and the jar labeled "The Last Time I Begged to Belong." Standing there, I realized something simple but powerful. Healing wasn't loud, it wasn't grand, it was quiet, like breathing again after years of holding your breath. I sat on the couch, pulled a blanket over my legs, and let the silence wrap around me. My phone buzzed once. Probably another wedding reminder from a mutual contact. I didn't look. I didn't care. Freedom wasn't about cutting everyone out. It was about not needing them to define me anymore. Freedom isn't silence. It's knowing I never needed their applause to begin with. What would you do if the people who raised you also erased you? Esme's story reminds us that sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the ones who claimed to love us most. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look loud. It can be a quiet decision to walk away, to protect your peace, and to stop paying the emotional debt someone else created. Have you ever had to cut ties with family to find yourself again? Share your story in the comments. We're listening. If this touched you, subscribe now to hear more powerful true life stories just like this one.